Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, and man, if you're listening to this on Monday morning when our podcast usually comes out, you might be thinking to yourself, "Ooh, at noon, all the big action is going to start." But Adam, I can't remember a lead up to that Monday legal tampering period with so much activity as this year. I mean, it started earlier in the week with, you get a big time Raiders extension for Max Crosby, then the Geno Smith trade, and then Saturday and a Sunday, it's Myles Garrett gets the extension, Devontae Adams signs with the Rams. Then there's another big trade. Oh, the DK Metcalf goes to the Steelers. Yep. It felt like the action started early.
It did. It's funny because we always say that once we get to Wednesday, the open of the new league year, everyone's gone. All the top players are gone. It's like ho-hum. It's so boring. But boy, I've never seen so much movement on Saturday and Sunday, particularly Sunday. Wow. And then you're going back a little bit. Myles Garrett changing his mind. It's amazing what $40 million a year would do. But although, look, with him, he wants to see the process, and I'm sure that Andrew Berry, their GM, has apprised him of what their plans are. Because all the money in the world doesn't change it. They've been bad, but if they finally get a quarterback who could play, it's not a bad roster. You saw what a good quarterback did, or a great rookie quarterback did for the Commanders, or Commandos, as it were. So bottom line is, it was wild. We'll get to the Eagles and what this looks like for them, but yeah, it's the process starts later today, man. It does. It's, as you said, we've got a number of deals done, mostly in-house, but some trades already.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about why last week there would be a lot of in-house deals, because this really isn't a strong free agency class. Almost every personnel person will tell you it's just not a lot of guys that you really confident feel are difference makers. There are some, but not as many as there, like last year, where all three running backs were huge difference makers, right, for their team: Saquon, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry. That was a really impactful free agency class. And those are just three running backs. There were others as well. So this one, you've seen more trades for proven commodities, right? And you've also seen in-house extensions, because teams would rather deal with what they know, go to the dance or with the person that you brought. And we'll see what happens when the madness starts Monday. But that's why we're seeing mostly trades for proven players and in-house extensions, because of the caliber of this year's free agency class.
And by the way, at receiver, the big reason why the Steelers made this trade, which will be official on Wednesday, it's weird because to get this deal done, they knew that Metcalf had to get a new deal, but it can't be he's got to pass a team physical. Not that he wouldn't, but it's just kind of funny that everything has been done, but it can't be official till a Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, the big deal, another reason why the Steelers did this is the draft class on paper, comparatively to tight end, which is very deep. There are about 7 starters, I'm told, that probably will be drafted at a minimum from the tight end group for the draft. But receiver, pretty weak. And also in free agency, that was a draft, but in free agency, it's honestly, it's a bunch of mid-level guys. I mean, really, it's. We'll see what happens with Chris Godwin, but they want him back and he wants to be back, but they haven't worked the contract out. But other than that, it's just you kind of want to hold on to what you got.
Yeah, 100%. That's why the Eagles brought back Zach Bond, of course, and we did do a lot of discussion with Sam Finkel, our analytics guy, our contract expert. If you haven't checked it out yet, you should really listen. He does a great job with using predictive models to figure out what contracts are going to be. And to your point, Adam, there are a lot of guys that you would consider middle of the pack or pretty good, not great, who are probably, according to the predictive models, probably going to get some decent money because it is free agency, especially at the cornerback position. We spent a lot of time on that because an average number 2 corner in the NFL still makes upwards of $10 to $12 million, which is a pretty decent sum of money there for a guy who's not considered the number 1 guy. So it just shows you where the market is going. And we just want to thank Sam for all the great work that he did on those contract models.
Yeah, no, it's. I know people like it. So yeah, it's like DJ Reed, by the way, right, of the Jets. He is the top free agent, but he was signed to be a number 2 corner for the Jets, and he was. Sauce Gardner's their number 1. I'll be interested to see what he gets. And Byron Murphy, the Vikings want to keep him. He's a pretty good number 2 corner. and he also could play inside. It just, if you look at corner, I know Carlton Davis wants to get paid. My man Mike Silver from the Athletic did a piece on him and with him. I know he gave him some quotes. It's Carlton wants to get paid, but if you really, now he's had some injuries, but he's a good player. But if you go through the 25 or 30 worthwhile corners, they're all kind of mid-level, mid to, as you're talking about, a little bit above mid to that upper level, but not elite. That's the thing in terms of fun.
Yeah, you don't find like Travarius Ward doesn't have like 5 Pro Bowls to his name. Asante Samuel Jr. doesn't have that either. DJ Reed, good player, like you said, but it was always sort of it was Sauce Gardner who was considered the star. He kind of didn't have a great third year, but his first year was amazing. But Reed was sort of the complement to that. So now we'll see if Reed can go get paid like a number 1 corner in the NFL. So in this podcast, and oh, by the way, great job by Andrew DeCecco all week long with his DeCecco dailies. He also did guys he felt were great free agent fits, both on offense and defense for the Eagles. Went through some combine leftovers, some guys, some small schools that he likes. So you got to make sure you're checking out every day the DeCecco daily because Andrew's really bringing it. So good job by him. In this podcast, we'll go through Eagles free agency, some of the things we're hearing, some of the timelines. We'll look back on last year, apply that to what we can expect this year, and we'll go through a couple of names of guys who are Eagles free agents who may either stay or go elsewhere. So a lot of moves, a lot of things we're going to get through here in this podcast. Adam, it's always important to remind people about the protocol here, when it starts, from legal tampering to the actual league year to when you have to be cap compliant. Go through the protocol for our great listeners.
All right. So today at 12 p.m. Eastern, so you could read agents who represent players who are unrestricted free agents. The agents could talk to other clubs in the behalf of their clients, but the client, by the way, cannot talk to other teams.
Right.
With one following exception. If you represent yourself, like Jacoby Brissett for years has represented himself, so he could talk to other teams because he represented himself. At least he used to. I know Bobby Wagner for a number. He re-signed with Washington. By the way, there are a lot of players who re-signed and they're getting paid. Jamie and Sherwood, the Jets linebacker, inside backer, a lot of people don't know about. It's been a great story development. A lot of guys re-signed. A lot of teams have a lot of cash, so you're seeing a lot of that. But if you don't represent yourself, you can't talk to these teams, the other teams, until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. But your agent can later today after 12. And you're going to see it happens every year. It could be a Rosenhaus client at like 12:05 Eastern.
Fastest conversations in the world.
Yeah. Jeez, it's amazing. I guess there was no tamper. They just happened to get it done. Yeah. There's usually, we get a lot of this though. Like a GM will say, hey man, listen, we want to be first in line. We want to talk to you. We want to do it the right way. We want to talk to you right when we're allowed to talk to you. You're allowed to do that. You could let the agents know that you want to talk to them. Now, obviously, tampering it's rampant. It's always been rampant. Very few teams have gotten caught over the years. It is what it is. So, and by the way, on cap compliant, yes, every team must be cap compliant. The new number is $279.2 million, or under that, of course, if you feel like you want to. And it's interesting because the Saints, as they always do, they just refuse to. They're the one team that you look at and you go, boy, they're going to have little. They're going to be the one team that actually has cap casualties. Players generally are not released due to cap reasons. It's cash. The teams don't think they're worth the money that they're being paid. It's something to do with cap, as we've said it 500 times. But you still, people always look at the cap first, which is, I understand why people do that, but it's if you learn anything from our show, players are being released because the teams simply don't want to pay them anymore. They don't think they could help them for the most part. But the Saints, because they restructured Derek Carr's deal to help themselves out, which it's funny. Mickey Loomis, their GM, a lot of people forgot about this. He went on record in the last month or so and saying we want Derek back, expect him to be back, and he sure is. So that's the Saints, but the Eagles are in good shape, by the way. They're ready to roll. But this one is going to be a little different, as you set it up earlier there. This one's going to be a little different. I don't expect them to be as spendy early, for lack of a better term. I don't see it the way that I know fans want all sorts of spending. They don't really need to do that. I just don't see it.
Right. They did a lot of that last year. And then, of course, the Eagles always consider their spending in-house to be part of quote unquote
Oh,
free agent
yeah, of
spending, like re-signing
course.
Zach Bond to a very high market deal. We'll see what happens with Cam Jurgens, but he's in line for an extension. When they give it that, they'll consider that their cash spending for the year, of course, because you have to pay a
Yep.
guy upfront money. So that Howie always says at the podium, you have to count what we do with our in-house guys and our extensions as quote unquote free agent signings because of the money that we're putting in to keep them here for the long term. So that'll be a big part of it. We will get into the Dallas Goedert situation too in this podcast as well. I just
Yeah.
want to reflect a little bit. You brought this up, and it was a really good idea on sort of the perception versus reality of last year's free agency because of some of the big hits like Saquon and Zach. I think people have sort of talked about last year's free agency as if the Eagles went wild in free agency and had this great hit rate. It's really not the case. They signed, they also didn't sign everybody right off the bat. They signed a pretty significant number of free agents, but many of them actually didn't work out. If you were just to grade free agency, Adam, on was it a hit or was it a miss, then the results would look a lot different. The fact that they hit really big on a few neutralized some of the misses there.
Well, the good thing for them is the small ones, other than Bryce Huff, that's we'll talk about that in a second. The small ones, it mostly inconsequential. Paris
Correct.
Campbell, that was a small one. I don't know how much he really has left, but let's go. We're going to give you the timeline. So here's what they did the first week. Kenny Pickett, they made the trade with Pittsburgh, right? Who was their number 2 quarterback. At least for now, he's their number 2 quarterback. It was last season. We'll see what happens as time goes by here. The big Barkley deal, that was a home run, obviously. They couldn't wait to get him signed. They signed him the first day that they're allowed to. Now, this goes to the next one is on your point, very small deal, and it didn't cost them anything. Matt Hennessy, who they signed to be their top backup guard center, didn't work out. Hennessy just didn't get the job done. So that, you could say it's a miss, but again, it didn't really cost them anything.
Right.
It was a little bit above veteran minimum. The Bryce Huff deal we'll talk about right now, that was one of those deals where that was a big deal. He didn't play well. He got hurt. He didn't get his job back when he was able to play, but he missed too much time anyway because he had the wrist surgery. He just didn't play well. That's a 3-year, $51 million deal, which is funny because that has been that's in the deals that have gotten done for players re-signing on defense. We've seen a bunch of like 3 years, 50, 51 million, depending on the team, whether it's it seems to be all defense. It's just funny how that was a number that teams have used. And now with Huff, I know some fans want the Eagles to move Huff. I don't see any way that they wouldn't be taking on money. If they're going to get a draft pick, if they're going to be able to move him, they're going to have to eat some of the money. Whether it's not all, but whether it's a majority of it, half of it remains to be seen if they move him at all. Now, if he stays here, he's got to prove himself. Even if he stays, I don't think this will not stop them from drafting an edge rusher early. It will not in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Well,
or whether they sign a veteran, on the street. Go ahead.
And when you say like they would have to eat, they have to eat some money to get it. I mean, that's not like their decision. They just have to, because if you trade him, money that's guaranteed through bonuses drains into their, you know what I'm saying? They can't agree with another team on like a 30-70 split of what's left. The only thing that like can be negotiated, I guess, in that regard would be non-guaranteed money. You know what I'm saying? Because guaranteed money drains to the team that signed the contract.
Well, here's the right. Here's the thing.
Go ahead.
No, but here's the thing, though. They've got these option bonuses. So, for instance, let's talk Huff here, right? Yep. He's got a $16 million option. That's 15.5 to be exact. 15.58 option bonus, which is fully guaranteed. The base salary is fully guaranteed. Right. And then the next year, he has no guaranteed money. It was a 2-year structure on a 3-year deal, and there were 4 void years for cap purposes. The bottom line is that no team is based on the way he played. I mean, though I still feel he would, which I think we learned, as he excelled in playing at a wide 9. That's where he's got to play. Like that's the front. I know the Eagles did a little bit of it, but not enough to get him comfortable.
True. So his future is very cloudy at this point.
Yep.
So he was one of those guys that was, I think, the second day of free agency was his signing, right?
Yep.
And then Bond came a day later, And then CJ Gardner-Johnson was also, him and Devontae Parker were also guys that were early on. And who would know that Devontae Parker was going to wind up retiring, which happens. I feel like it happens to the Eagles more than any other team. That they get guys just randomly decide to retire.
The linebacker, the linebacker that they signed formerly of the Chargers, correct?
Yeah, Jatavis Brown was, I believe, his name. But there was another guy, too, that they signed a while back. No, was it Marquise Goodwin that they traded for, and then he retired, but then he unretired?
That was weird. That they never went through, right? They sent him back to the Niners. But okay, so the first week, Pickett, we talk about Barkley, Hennessy, Bryce Huff, Zach Bond. They signed to be a backup for $3.5 million. Obviously, it was a home run. Who knew? Who the hell knew? No one knew. It's kind of funny and good for Zach. What a great story. Gardner Johnson, by the way, after a slow start, that was a good signing. He did a good job. He signed the same. He signed the same day Bond did. And you mentioned Devontae Parker. He signed the first week. Then he retired in May. He was signed to be their third receiver. Then the next week, they signed Paris Campbell. He kind of on and off the roster, practice squad, and so forth. This one was a miss. We're going to mention Devin White. Now they got a break by releasing White early. They did a settlement on his contract, saved some money, but that was a miss. There's no question about it. But see, then you have another guy who signed a day after him, and Burks did a really good job. That for way less money. Again, it's another one. Who knew? Now he got off to sort of a slow start. He had the knee injury in training camp. We should mention that. But boy, did he close the playoffs really well. He looked terrific.
Yeah, he's a good player. It'll be interesting to see his market, and I think the Eagles would be wise to try to bring him back. We'll get into that. So then, what we know that the Eagles do really well, Adam, is finding those bargains later in free. That's why Howie always says, "Don't judge us just on the first 2 weeks. Free agency is not over after the first week." Even though a lot of people are like, "Oh man, this guy went there, and there's nobody left." There's plenty of guys who can help a team left. The Eagles have proven that year after year.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, let's go to the later section. Okay, CJ Uzomah signed in April. It was on and off the roster. This to me counted in free agency because they agreed to a deal the year before with Isaiah Rodgers, but he was suspended, so he got reinstated on April 23rd, and that turned out to be a really good move. He who knew, because all the Eagles could do was talk to the agent. They didn't have access to him when he was suspended. And he turned out to be a really good signing. Isaiah would like to be able to compete for a starting job. We'll see where that goes. That's our understanding. We'll see where that goes. He good player, and he could run. He's still pretty young, by the way. So we'll see where that goes.
He has that going for him. He's young and he can run. He showed that. He played well in his spurts with the Eagles.
Yeah, and he, as a matter of fact, I don't think he has an injury history at all. Yeah, in fact, he had the wrist injury, and he did an excellent job of coming back. He actually came back early, as we understood it then. So we'll see. He turns. In fact, he just turned 27 a couple months ago, so he's still pretty young. Now, on your point about after the draft, this one happened right after the draft, and I know a lot of fans rolled their eyes, and we were like, "Well, I know you had the scoop that he was going to play guard, but Mekhi Becton, that's another one." That's another one. Like, obviously, Howie signed him, that he gets credit, but so does the offensive line coach and Mekhi himself. That one is one like you just can't see coming. Him learning how to play guard and actually doing a solid job there.
Right. The funny thing is, as you look at the other ones, the Eagles tried so hard to have a backup for Cam Jurgens, Cam's first year as a starter. We talked about signing Hennessy, but then even later, Max Sharping in June. Sharping's a guard, but I believe he had also played some center, if I recall correctly. And
a little bit.
Nick Gates, a little bit. Nick Gates, who of course had played center and guard, they signed him in late July. I mean, they were really looking to arm themselves with somebody that could back up Jurgens if needed, and it wound up being that the guy they were going to use was Landon Dickerson and sort of deviate from their past protocol.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so they tried a bunch of guys. It didn't really work. Although Nick Gates was there for a little bit. He signed in late July, by the way. Sharping didn't make it. He was signed in early June, but it wound up not being a big deal. But they tried, as you said. We'll see what they do here. And then Dotson was acquired before this late in August before the season started. He wound up being their third receiver. And, he came on. He's on the final year of his rookie deal now, the 2025. I'll be interested to see, because now they have a new coordinator, if they change it all in terms of their personnel groupings. That's something to keep an eye on. We'll be looking at in OTAs.
You mean would they be more of 11 personnel?
Correct. Or will they, because we know how heavy 12 they were, because with Barkley, you're going to use 2 tight ends, and, Kellen Moore went against usually what he does, and it worked. Can't argue. They won a Super Bowl with it, but we'll see.
I feel like they need a reason to. They need either a Dotson or a Johnny Wilson or an Anais Smith to really step up in this next year, in each of their second years with the team, and seize that for them to want to do that. Did Jahan Dotson come on as far as he made some plays in the Super Bowl? I mean, a guy just got lost in his zone and he caught it on the left side. The other one was a nice double move. That was the first one. That was almost a touchdown. That was a nice little double move, little stutter and go. But in general, I think he only caught 15 passes for the whole year. So he'd have to prove a lot. It's got to be a big leap within that offense. But, and we'll get to it later, maybe if there's no Dallas Goedert on the team, then there's more of an opening for a number 3 receiver or an inside receiver, depending on what they would do at tight end.
Yeah, he only had 19 catches, but again, they really threw it to him. But I did like that that he came on late. He was healthy. He made some plays when he needed to. Obviously, in the Super Bowl, he made a big play. So that's it. So you're right. The small moves most of them did not work out. Well, again, when I say that, asterisk, the Zach Bond move was small because he was supposed to be a backup, maybe edge and maybe some inside backer. Nobody saw it coming, and it was supposed to be a small, but wound up being just one of these things you cannot plan for. Speaking of what happened last, what's that?
Finish your thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say some of the things that happened last year. I don't want to be one of those guys who would say there's been a lot of luck involved, but Zach Bond, nobody saw it coming. Who the hell thought? I guess I'm sure it was Stout who thought Becton could play guard. I mean, you obviously how he signed him, he gets at least half the credit, but the coaching here is so important. I just cannot underestimate that for folks. We have to outline it. The coaching here is so great. The marriage between Howie and the coaches, for all that Sirianni said 2 years ago about, hey, Howie talked about some of the young guys got to play, and Nick's like, hey, we'll play the best players, whatever they said. We understand both guys what they were saying, but the development that the players made last season, in our 8 years, this is our 8th year. I don't know that there's been a better coaching job than last season.
Oh, especially the young guys. Absolutely. It was an amazing coaching job. And I was just I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was going to hammer home your point about how luck can be involved, because Becton was competing with Tyler Steen. Tyler Steen got an ankle injury very early in training camp.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
Put Becton in there for quite a bit. And once he got in there, it was he got better and he got more reps. And if Tyler Steen had never suffered that ankle injury, we really don't know what would have happened. I mean, Tyler could have played well. I mean, I'm sure the Eagles would have been fine, because it just would have meant Tyler played really well, then he's playing at a high level. But for Mekhi Becton himself, that was a nice stroke of fortune. Well, not of misfortune by a teammate. I'm sure he's not happy about it, but Tyler Steen hurting his ankle opened up the door for Mekhi Becton to get that job. And it would have been weird to see what would have happened if that ankle injury never occurred.
Yeah, I now that you mentioned this, we really haven't talked about this since last summer, but it didn't seem like Steen ever really, once Becton got in there, and he was the one thing I saw in training camp is he never looked uncomfortable, which surprised the hell out of me, because he's really because he's so big, although he lost a lot of weight. He's tall too, not just the weight, but he did lose a lot of weight. But he's built like a tackle, and you don't imagine that he could play this well. You wouldn't. When I say well, now we don't have access to their grades. We know other teams said he looked good, not great. Bottom line is he wasn't a detriment. He played well enough to keep the job. They never considered benching him. Right. Did a good enough job, and I'll be interested to see. We think the Eagles have some interest bringing him back, but the question then would be, where other teams are on him, do they see him as a guard because he did well enough to get interest, or the tackle, which is his natural position? But as you said earlier, what happened last season really helped him, because not only was he in shape, He didn't miss much playing time due to injury. It's to the point now, he's still pretty young. Is there anyone who's looking at him to be a big-time starter? I'd be shocked if he got big-time money because of his injury history, but the tape is good enough that he's getting interest. We know that as a fact. He's got interest out there.
All right, let's get into the Eagles' free agent needs, and then we'll sort of update what we know about their in-house free agents and players. Before we do that, you got to hear a word. You must hear a word from our friends, our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, folks, make sure you go in to Sky Motor Cars or visit them at SkyMotorCars.com because you'll get the best car shopping experience there is. Whether you're buying, whether you're trading in, whether you're just perusing for the future, you want to see inventory, you want great customer service, you want to ask about certain cars or what the market for cars is like, Sky Motor Cars has it all. They have a great staff. Brett Schulter and his crew will treat you like royalty. And if you tell them that Adam and Geoff sent you, if you go into there at Westchester, PA, right, go in there, tell them Adam and Geoff sent you, you'll get the greatest deal because they love Inside the Birds and we love them. So make sure you do treat yourself to Sky Motor Cars, SkyMotorCars.com. All right, Adam, let's talk about we'll give a picture on what the Eagles need here headed into free agency. I mean, they obviously have holes on both sides, and they're going to lose some players. That's going to mean a lot. I have my own hierarchy just from digging into it. I think we probably see it the same way too, as far as like they're going to need a lot of different positions we'll go through. But what they really, really need, the two spots that scream help, whether it's trade market, draft, or free agency, are edge and corner, assuming if Rodgers, Slay, and both aren't back, or if one of those two aren't back. Those are the two that really jump out. There will be other needs that we'll get into, but those two, they jump out.
Yep. Let's start at offense. Gainwell, my sense is if as long as, I mean, I'm sure there's some coaches like Kellen Moore or someone like that, someone out there who's worked with him in the past might have interest, because that's part of this free agency, by the way, with so many coaches. I mean, you can go back to Gannon. I'm surprised that Gannon and the Cardinals didn't bring in more former Eagles, but he brought Nick Rollis, who's now his D coordinator. But anyway, Gainwell's a guy that the Eagles have a very high opinion of. If he's willing to be reasonable in the money, I think there's a realistic chance he returns. But we'll see. The thing I've learned about the free agency is it only takes one team to surprise you and say, hey, we see him a little bit better than this team does, because the guy can block, and he certainly has shown that he's got a dual role. Short yardage, who knew coming out of Memphis, because that's not what he did at Memphis. And he's a really good blocker. So we'll see what happens there. But that's one to watch here, no question about it. Backup offensive line, we talked about this last week. They need a swing offensive lineman, particularly with the Becton situation. Now they'll watch that. Now, Darian Kennard, I know you had the scoop last year when they brought him in. Didn't they see him as a right tackle first, though? Isn't he kind of just a right tackle? Maybe
no, they actually saw him as a guard. We were told that they were going to work him out at guard, which they did. They worked him out in the offseason. I remember even Lane Johnson saying, yeah, this guy's been playing next to me for a little bit.
Right guard. Okay.
Yeah, but I think once the Becton and Steen thing became a competition, and then they started to sign more guard centers that we mentioned, like Gates, like Sharping, and they drafted a couple of guards. They drafted a guard in Keegan and a center in McMahon, even though he's not on the team anymore. They felt like we got the best chance for Kennard to get some playing time. We have to evaluate him is going to be a tackle where they had Fred Johnson, but they didn't have too many other bodies that they wanted to throw out there. And then he wound up playing so much tackle in the preseason that they kept him there. But, every offseason brings on you lose guy. We'll see what happens with Fred. We'll see what happens with Becton. It may be a case where they take another look at him inside again. We'll see.
Yeah, because Kennard is over 6'5", but he's built like a right tackle guard, and as you just said, they played him at both, they practiced him at both positions. Now, Fred Johnson, I'm
By
sure
the
he'd
way,
love to be.
I'm sorry, I forgot to. It's because the Chiefs drafted him as a tackle, but he didn't make it as a tackle with them. He was on their He was practicing at guard with them over the last, I think, the year that he was on the practice squad, but whatever, 2 years ago. So that's where the Eagles kind of came in and tried to replicate that. But go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm saying with Fred Johnson, I'd be very surprised if he's found a starting job anywhere. He's a quality backup tackle, no doubt. He can play right or left tackle. He's just, he's been a journeyman. It's not like he's, super old. He's actually not. He only turns 28 in June. He's been a great story. Another guy who, again, developed last season. His story's phenomenal. Love hearing him speak. His interviews are great, by the way, when he gets a chance to do it. But so good luck to Fred. Obviously, the Eagles would bring him back if the price is right. We'll see what happens with Fred if DeRosenhaus's agent can find that kind of deal that's out there. Be a starting player. Now, tight end. Let's put it this way, folks. Other teams have told us, we might as well just get to this Dallas Goedert stuff. Other teams have told us that the Eagles seem motivated to move Dallas Goedert. We've talked about this with our Patreon group for like 3 weeks. We expected Goedert to be moved, or a good chance to be moved. We'll see. Never lock with this stuff. Goedert is 30. He just turned 30 in January. Everybody knows he's had bad luck with injury. He's a terrific player when healthy. I mean, I know the record without him is good, but that's not great. That's not really why you would move him. Oh, well, our record's great. Let's move him. It's because he's 30, and we don't get the feeling the Eagles have any interest in extending his contract at this point. And we expect them to find interest. Other teams feel like they're not asking for a lot. I know my old comrade at Josina Anderson, she and I worked together at ESPN for a number of years, and she put out that they're willing to take a fourth, I think. Isn't that what we saw? In fact, I know some teams think like it doesn't have to be this year, that whatever pick they wind up getting, they may wind up being willing to. There's one guy said to me, he goes, "It sounds like they're willing to take maybe future years, depending on the level of pick." Look, he's making just over $14 million in total cash. That's a lot of money for a guy 30 that you're not going to extend. But if you look at other teams, the one team that I would watch for, because they just I know you and I have talked about this in the past. The Colts have not got it right at tight end. Remember we talked about the free agent list. Mo Alley Cox is out there.
Yep.
Kylan Granson is more of an H-back, move tight end. Goddard just does everything well. And they've had such bad luck with Jelani Woods, number 80, who was a third rounder, who's in 22 is on the fund. He was rookie deal. And Will Mallory's there out of Miami. He's on his third year. That's one team to watch for.
Plus, I know that Shane Steichen has a rapport.
Thank you.
Goddard is the perfect RPO type of weapon that they're probably going to want to continue to do.
Jim Bob Cooter. Yep.
You're absolutely right. Jim Bob Cooter. Yeah, it would make a lot of sense there.
Yeah.
Plus, they honestly, that team needs a leader and an ass kicker on offense. They need.
He is it when he's playing. He gets after him.
Yeah, he could.
So I would watch that team. I know the Titans are looking for help at tight end, but their situation is, obviously they just need a lot of help. They're Chiga Conco is a move tight end. He's just not. He doesn't block very well. Josh Wiles okay. Nick Vanette, who's a wide tight end, is up. He's been around the league a long time, but there are a number of teams that need tight ends. But see, here's the thing. As I said earlier, there are at least 7 starting tight ends that are going to get drafted in like the first 3 rounds. We'll when we do our draft coverage after free agency quiets down, when we go into the tape from when we have Greg Cosell, and you'll know about it. But that's the word we got from talking to teams, is that's a position that's pretty deep, and you should be able to get a starter as late as the 3rd round, which is saying a lot, by the way. It's usually not very deep in tight end, but this is a good group. So we'll see what happens with Goedert. But the thing is about trading Goedert, they got nobody to replace him, like literally nobody.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah, Listen, the Eagles have kind of done this before with certain players where they're just like, we're not going to pay that, and we'll trade the guy for various reasons. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's been other reasons. But this is a good tight end draft. There are probably some guys they can sign. If it were us, I think we would keep Dallas Goedert and make him play the last year of his contract out. But you and I aren't Howie. And the Eagles never lack for I can't say they never lack for a plan B. Sometimes their plan B just hasn't worked out, right? They let TJ Edwards go. They thought they could make it work with guys like Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow. They couldn't. So
Sure.
unfortunately, they learned that the hard way. But the Eagles will have a plan B. The question is, will it be a good enough plan B? But no matter what, Adam, they're going to be stacked on offense because of what they have at wide receiver, running back, and offensive line and quarterback.
Yeah, and also I would just watch the veteran market. Juwan Johnson's out there of the Saints. I know the Saints are looking at tight ends as we've heard it, and also who gets cut. We should mention, first of all, anyone who's cut is not they don't impact the compensatory formula. So sometimes, look, if you want to win a Super Bowl, this is a good place to go. The defending champs, as you mentioned, the roster's absolutely stacked. It's just something to watch. Is what the Eagles do with these, because I know the fans wanted Harold Landry, and he agreed to a deal Sunday night with the Patriots. But guys who are going to be cost effective, not going to cost a lot of money, that don't count against the compensatory formula, that they could help this team, and that the tight end's the one to watch here. What they do.
Yeah, and then obviously that becomes, I said edge and corner are just
most corner big time.
But if Goedert's gone, tight end, you can just throw that right into the group, because it's maybe not as important because of what they have around him on offense, but you still will need somebody who can run and block and catch at somewhat of a decent level to make what they can work.
Yep. See, Evan Ingram is a outstanding pass catching tight end. He's just not a blocker, so he's out there. Guys who would be. See, if you go through the list, Gerald Everett, same guy, similar guy. He could run. He's not much of a blocker. Now, there are guys in the secondary market. John Bates, who's a pretty good wide tight end, shouldn't cost. I say shouldn't. You never know when you get to free agency. It's just with all the cap space and teams having more money than ever. It's the way that teams are more profitable. So you never know. But that tight end's one to watch. There's obviously, with the Goedert situation, got to watch that defensively. D tackle. Milton Williams is going to get a big deal. This is what we felt for months now. I did nothing that we've heard combine or ever since would change my mind. If you look at the unrestricted free agents, I mean, it's Milton Williams, and some guys have been cut. We mentioned Draymond Jones last week, Jonathan Allen, who's older. There are a lot of older players. Now, the Eagles could also, by the way, to potentially replace Milton, they could see who gets cut. It is a buyer's market. We said it for UFAs. There are a lot of them. But there are a lot of guys who have been cut. Roy Robertson Harris was cut. He's a good player. Roquan Davis, who I think he played 1 year for Fangio a couple years ago. In fact, in 23, I think he was with Miami, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, there are a lot of guys out there. They don't have to. The Eagles could wait, because as you said earlier, the Eagles, as they did later in free agency, when they got Becton right after the draft. You don't have to sign every position where you have an obvious need right now.
Right. And the Eagles have sort of prepared for this. I mean, they've got Moro Jomo to be able to play the 4-eye and the 3 technique in the 4-man front, 4-eye and the 5-man front alongside. They still have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter being, if not the best in the business, top 3, and he ain't 3. So their 5-man front's good. Their 4-man front's good, Jomo, but they also brought in guys like Byron Young and Gabe Hall. So, and again, those guys have to prove themselves. But like you said, they are guaranteed to at least sign one veteran, or probably be a short-term deal, just like a Contavious Street from a few years ago. Oh, I forgot to mention the guy, Booker. Booker, is he a free agent? I forget.
No, he's not. He's not.
So he's still with the team. So they've got bodies there. That's why even losing someone as good as Milton Williams is, it's not necessary. You look at edge and corner and say they really need bodies there more so than the 3 technique 4-eye, because they've been prepared for this. They have guys who can step in.
Yeah, I believe Booker is a exclusive rights free agent. Or wait, hang on. Let me see. No, actually, he signed a 2-year deal with the Eagles in January of 24. So he is still signed. He's making the minimum of $1.03 million. So yeah, he's good to go. They're going to add that position. As we learned last year, it doesn't necessarily have to be a veteran. It would make sense if they did, but they're going to have to add someone going forward here. Milton Williams, if he gets, because let's put it this way, the numbers we've been using is somewhere around 21 million or more. If you really look at it, that's the floor. Aleem McNeil got $24.5 million, a little bit more than I expected when I was researching that deal. That was a great deal, and I know he had an ACL injury. Let's move that aside. He's a good football player. He's a very athletic nose, but who lost a lot of weight a couple years ago. Was doing great before he got hurt. Milton Williams is a better football player.
Mm-hmm.
I know Milton's not a big sack guy, but he's a big pressure guy. And whether it's Jonathan Gannon or somebody else who's got cash and cap, someone's going to spend big. And there's the other thing is, not that the Bengals are a good example because they usually don't get heavily involved in free agency. They usually try to sign their own guys. But bottom line is, their teams. There's so many teams now that have cash to spend. I can't imagine Milton, who changed agents, by the way, last summer. The guy that represents him now did Myles Garrett's first extension, which is, by the way, historic. It was $25 million a year, which is way over market. So Milton's going to get paid. Yeah,
Milton's going to get paid. All right. So that's as far as defense D tackle, edge, and inside linebacker. We've talked about that with Oren Burks. We'll see what happens with him. They've got Jeremiah Trotter. We know Nakobe Dean is expected to come back and play. He's got to get through his patellar tendon rehab first. So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
Edge is important, man. They're you and I, from what we're hearing, it's not like it's going to be this big free agent binge spending like you could say last year was, but they certainly have to this may be a creative thing too. Who knows? Trade, I don't know. But they certainly have to. You can't go into the year with Jalix Hunt, especially if you're not going to bring back Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith, and that's just about it. Especially with Nolan coming off his own injury and Jalix Hunt, very promising, but you got to have bodies. You need some more, and they need a veteran, like a big. I would also think
they do. Yes, there they do.
They not only need a veteran, I think they need a guy with some size, some hands. Right now, they've got these undersized, explosive guys. They need someone who's like Brandon Graham, who could just bull rush, push a pocket back, give you what either a Brandon or a Josh Sweat used to give you, which is just kind of that raw power off the edge.
Now, the guy that I like, it's out from ESPN that the lines are going to release, is Darius Smith, and he's making $11 million in total cash. He's got a roster bonus that's due by Friday, so it sounds like they're going to move on from that. Now, the question is, do they bring him back at a lower number? He's got good size. Bud Dupree, by the way, has got a roster bonus. Let's see if they pick that up. The Chargers, by the way, which is due over the weekend. Now, he's got good size. He's put on size over the years. He came in lighter when he was drafted by the Steelers, but he's up there. He's a good veteran now, but he's still with the Chargers right now. He's not. Right now he's on the roster. So yeah, I would agree with you. We're expecting size there. With Josh Sweat likely to move on, which we'll mention. It would be stunning if he was back because he's another guy that Drew Rosenhaus. He changed agents. Drew. I know some teams have been acting. We've talked to about edge. It feels like Sweat's got a deal out there. So we'll see what happens there. But I agree with you. Yes. The names to watch would be, no, we pretty much gave you the guys with length or someone who'd be economical, by the way. Go ahead.
You wonder if Howie can be a real salesman or Jeffrey or Jalen Hurts makes a call, because I once had a conversation with Howie about a free agent. This is way back when.
Okay.
That I knew the Eagles were interested in. And Howie's comment to me was, he'll be an Eagle if he wants to be an Eagle, which was Howie's way of saying, we're going to make him an offer. It's not going to be the best offer out there.
Right.
But if he wants to come play for us, he'll take this offer, right? And he's been able to get other guys to come to the team. Maybe we've reported on several guys who had better offers somewhere. Sometimes the guy takes a better offer, sometimes he doesn't. So you wonder if maybe a guy like Khalil Mack will come on a 1-year deal to win a championship with the Eagles, or at least to try to win a championship for the Eagles. Would he take less money than another team just because the opportunity is there? You don't know, but that's a guy who would obviously any team would love to have, even on a short-term deal. He can help you out.
Yeah, he's got ideal length. He is a guy. There'll be Hall of Fame talk with him. Boy, that we've probably talked about that Raiders trade over the years. Boy, the Bears, they did well with him. And by the way, Vic did coach him, I believe. Did he not? I'm sure he did.
Vic did coach him. Yes.
Yeah.
He was the defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Landry was an interesting guy too from Tennessee. They parted ways with him. He reunited with Vrabel in New England on a pretty decent deal, actually. But he had worked with Bobby King in Tennessee. So, I know Andrew DeCecco and some others had tried to connect some dots there. But
Who's that? Wait, who's that?
Landry.
Oh, yeah. Who signed with the Patriots. Yeah, we're great.
Patriots, right. Yeah. So he reunited with his former coach. It just wasn't Bobby King. It was
right. Vrabel. Yeah, that's funny. And their roster's really bad. They have the most cash and cap to spend. In fact, they're right up there, the most cap space in NFL history to spend. Although I know from what I'm hearing, they want to sign a decent amount of free agents, but they know they're so far away. They're not trying to, by signing all these free agents, go from whatever wins they had to 5 or 6. They're looking long term, so they really want to do it for the draft. So and Elliot Wolf, by the way, their personnel director overseas, who basically has GM powers. Remember, he came from the Packers, where when he worked for Ted Thompson, Ted did not really get involved in free agency very rarely, other than Charles Woodson. So
he is the son of Ron Wolf, right? Or nephew
right.
Of Ron
Wolf? Yeah.
So I mean, everybody knows Ron Wolf for the Packers was not a big guy in the free agency. He was more about draft and development.
Reggie, but yeah.
Other than Reggie, yes, there were a couple of splashes, but
they rarely did. You're right.
Yeah,
mainly
they were draft and developed.
Although Brian Gutekunst, the new GM, or I knew he's the last, he's the latest GM. He's been there for a long time, but he replaced Ted Thompson. Yeah, he gets more involved in it. For people mentioning Chase Young, I don't see that. I know fans would like to see Chase Young because he had a nice year for the Saints and he's got good size, but as we said last week, whoever they bring in, they want to see Jalen Hunt compete and potentially win, potentially be that guy. Yes, that's forward thinking, but this kid is so far ahead of schedule. You want to see what the next step is. It leaves you wanting more, which is a good thing. So, right, see what happens.
And of course, if edge is 1, corner might be 1A or 2, whatever you want to call it. But no Slay, no Rodgers. If that's the case, you need an outside corner. I know the team wants to look at Ringo, but you got to have some other guys out there. You need a starting corner.
Yeah, there are a lot of them out there, but again, we don't see the Eagles spending big money. There's a journeyman type. There's the low to mid-level free agent, which would make more sense. There are guys on the street like Kendall Fuller, who's played good football for the Commanders and lately of the Dolphins. I mean, it's certainly a buyer's market in free agency at corners. Some positions are not, where it's more of a seller's market, which means the players have the more leverage. Clubs looking for a corner. There's just a lot of them out there. But it's just a matter of how the Eagles want to look at this. But we know they're going to add to that. And even if they re-sign Rodgers, that's not going to stop them from adding someone in the draft potentially. So, because if you're trying to get back to where you just were, and by the way, they can definitely do it with a good offseason, particularly in the draft, and whatever free agents they add. This thing is built so well with a core roster that this is one of the best core rosters in not only the history of our show, that you and I covering this team. It's just really young, and they don't have this rapid development. They just don't need to do anything like crazy. There's no reason to do it.
Right. There you go. All right. Just some other names to mention. We did mention that Paris Campbell is a free agent, right? He is. Britton Covey is a restricted free agent.
Yes. And we are not expecting him to get tendered. Why? The right of first refusal tenders over $3 million, so that cannot be justified. Now, it doesn't mean that if they don't tender him, they can't bring him back at a lower number. The number of teams do that when they think the low tender is still too much. It actually went up. It's over $3 million. That's a lot for a guy who right now, quite frankly, even if he comes back, is a backup slot. And you would think he could be their punt returner, but that depends on what they want to do with DeJean, which we'll get to in a minute.
Absolutely. I think they did that with Jack Stoll, right? He was a restricted free agent. They weren't going to pay him whatever the tender number was, but they wound up bringing him back on a 1-year deal that was more reasonable. This was like a year or two ago when he was a restricted free agent. I believe that if you go look back and look, they had agreed to a 1-year deal with him that made a lot more sense than the tender number. Yeah,
that's right. He was a undrafted free agent in 2021. Yeah, so he would have been. Yeah, I remember talking about that. We were told they were not going to tender him, but they didn't. And then what happened last year was they took a risk. I know it's a small thing, just having a Y tight end, but it's just funny. That's what they were missing. We know they won a Super Bowl without having one, other than what Goedert does. But he wanted to be back. They wanted him back, but they took a risk. They needed a roster spot, and the Dolphins claimed him. Then was he ever active, or was it late in the season? Was he active?
Didn't they elevate him for one game, I believe, or I think they had him.
We talked about it. They never really gave him a chance. It's like, well, why are you claiming him if you're not going to play him? You know?
It's very odd.
Yeah.
What's the protocol for injured players like, say, Jack Driscoll, who was last we checked was on injured reserve, right?
Yeah, he's a free agent. He's a free agent.
He's a free agent, but I mean, he can sign. But I guess what I'm asking is, usually you have to pass a physical. Have you seen teams sign injured players knowing that they won't pass a physical, but you take the risk anyway because you want the player?
Yes. Well, I don't know if they knew Caden Stearns wouldn't pass it, but remember he had that really bad knee injury. Great example. Remember they signed him, cut him, signed him, cut him. He has not resumed his career. He's a young player, and Vic coached.
Mm-hmm.
But because I remember we talked about this, that they knew he wouldn't be ready when they signed him. This was on your point. I didn't even know this wasn't even our script. It's funny you mentioned this. That would be the best example that I could remember, where the team signed a guy knowing he wouldn't contribute for a while, but hopefully the knee would get right, and he just was never. They went to another team that came back to the Eagles, and that was it. So we wish him good luck.
Yeah. The only other guy I think we have not yet talked about who becomes a free agent is Avonte Maddox. I want to say that I'm not going to slam the door on him because he could be a guy to come in and compete for a backup safety spot. I mean, last year he went out, tested free agency, didn't find anything. Came back, wound up starting the year as Eagles nickel for the first 4 weeks, got benched, became their dime corner. So he had a role. We played a couple of snaps per game whenever they wanted dime, had a huge pass breakup in the Super Bowl, I believe, out of the nickel spot because DeJean got banged up for one play and came out. There's no reason you can't just bring him back in June if he's got no takers and say, hey, we'll still have you compete with us. So I think it's easy to say he's done. He lost his job, but there's always room for depth here.
Yeah, high character guy. When healthy early in his career, he was really one of the best nickels in the NFL. He had a 1-year deal last year, I think worth. I think it was $2 million. Let me double check. Maddox last year, $2 million. And of course, if it's his last play as an Eagle, it was a huge one in the Super Bowl. It's great deflection, great anticipation on that play. So. Lastly here, this is actually important. What are we hearing on Cooper DeJean? What are your thoughts here?
I'd like him to stay in the nickel. We've been talking about that. I mean, he's at least for 2025. Beyond that, who knows? But that's why we talk about outside corner. You lose Slay, you lose Rodgers. Do they have the optionality? Sure, they have the optionality of saying, well, we don't like what's left, or we're going to sign a guy, but we can't be sure this guy's going to be better than DeJean on the outside, and that can be worked out in training camp. But for now, if they had their way, they get a good outside corner and they can keep DeJean at nickelback.
Yeah, everything you and I've heard, really going back to the combine, was that their preference is to keep DeJean, at least this season, as you said, as nickel. That leaves a pretty big hole at outside corner, because right now under contract, you've got Ringo, who you mentioned, and Eli Ricks. And obviously Mitchell, but we're talking about who's going to play opposite Mitchell. And Rodgers is up. It's funny? Not that, and we couldn't blame the Eagles for not keeping him, because he was really only a special teams player. But Josh Jobe did a good job for Seattle. Yeah, he just signed a new deal. It wasn't for very much, but good for Josh Jobe.
Yeah, he's a great special teamer. I know he actually played corner for them and probably played it fairly well. But yeah, he's really. I imagine the deal is mainly because he's a very good special teamer as well.
Yeah, good story for him.
Yeah. So, by the way, going back to the optionality, I mean, Vic has already shown that he's not afraid to make a move not on a whim, like he may have in his mind, but remember, he had Quinyon Mitchell practicing at nickelback for pretty much the entirety of camp.
Did he do dime? Wasn't he a dime corner one?
His first few practices were dime, right? But then
I remember that.
Settled in as nickelback. Well, because Cooper DeJean was hurt, remember?
Yep.
And because they had Rodgers and Ringo that were getting snaps to compete on the outside opposite Darius Slay. But then, obviously, Cooper got healthy. They wanted to see Cooper in the slot, and then they moved Quinyon. It was only, I think, a week, 10 days before the season opener that they moved Mitchell to the outside spot, because for most of camp, it was Rodgers and Ringo. It was really
Exactly.
Rodgers
You
and
nailed
Ringo
it.
for a week, and then it was Rodgers.
Well, it's funny because I'm like, okay, are they really serious? Mitchell's been dominant. Why aren't they moving to outside corner? Then you go, just as you said it.
Right.
Like a week later they did. It's funny you
So
say
they
that.
can have all these plans for bringing in an outside corner and keeping Cooper at nickel, but 10 days before the season, which is a lot far from now, they could say, like, you know what, we just didn't hit on this guy for outside. We just have to move Cooper to nickel and then use either a safety as a slot. We'll figure it out. We'll play big nickel, or we'll find another slot, or somebody we signed or drafted has impressed us there. So they have optionality.
They do. This is so to sum it up, watch the Goedert situation. Other teams tell us that the Eagles are motivated to move him. His age, a lot of money. Good. We know how good of a football player he is. We'll see what happens there. We're expecting them to do something with edge again. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It could be they could wait till the draft, but we're expecting them to do something at edge and outside corner. As Vic would say, no, corner is corner. Nickel is nickel. Thank you, Vic, for correcting us. Yeah, we I have that in our head because, man, when he was stern with that with the media in the spring, hey, good for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And inside backer is inside backer.
That's right. So real quick, just for those who know, because the draft is very important. The Eagles have 7 picks. They have picks rounds 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and then they have 3 fifth-round picks. You and I both know that it's almost, forget the fact that they're going to pick any of these picks in these spots or even finish with 7 picks, but that is what they have as of now. We'll see if they add another from a trade, whether it's Dallas Goedert or somebody else that we're not thinking of. You and I talked about this. There's not a whole lot of guys. Howie's always good for a surprise, but there's really nobody else we could think of on the 53 who you would say, oh, that's a guy that maybe the Eagles would trade to get like a decent pick. There's no one. They're just too tied into so many guys that are important to what they do.
Yeah, you and I were talking about it off the air. They're young. Usually when you do that, whether it's baseball or football, you're looking to trade a veteran, but it's really hard. The other clubs know this, and they rather say, well, they're aware, like, why don't they're going to cut him, so let's just sign the guy. It's like everyone knew the Jets were going to cut Devontae Adams. He was making over $35 million. No one's taking that. And they got a new GM. Joe Douglas is gone. So the Rams waited. They got him at a much better price. And that's just what you do. So we're not expecting this to be like the fireworks of last year in terms of Barkley and whatever. But watch what happens with release players, or if they're not happy with what's out there, let's see what they do in the draft. But they've got a great core of the roster, and we haven't always said that. In fact, we haven't really said that before until this past season, because they got it going on with this team.
All right. Well, the madness is already underway, but noon today, noon Monday, it technically begins with the legal tampering period, and then 4:00 Wednesday will be the time where it's safe to announce all of these moves that are going to be made. The start of the new league year. Inside the Birds will have you covered along the way. Stay very in key and in tune with our socials at Inside Birds, at Caplan NFL, at Geoff P. Mosher, because we could be doing emergency pods or whatever you want. We're going to be pumping out a lot of content this week based on.
And on Patreon. Watch Patreon, folks.
Now's a great time to become Patreon member, patreon.com/InsideTheBirds, because we're giving them everything as fast as we get it. So patreon.com/InsideTheBirds. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.